something yesterday.
I'll take it.
You know, the first thing they're gonna say to me if I
But
ask
it's like, it's crazy.
is, what's the plan with the data?
Right.
You know how they got so much dough? Because they're smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if it isn't a plan. Well, Alicia's here. What are you serving today? What are you serving?
Hi, Representative.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
How's the family?
Everybody's good.
Good,
How
good, good. Oh, the console's on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to small talk. I thought we were waiting.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have a bit of a tight timeline with guests today. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. It's 1:02. We have a number of guests here today. We have two people named Alana DeMario. Uh, Hello, Alana and Tina. It's good to see you. Tina, that joke is because on our screen, you two are listed as Alana DeMario.
I know. I shared my link with the representative,
did
and
you?
so I think it added us both as me.
That's really funny. And we have Jeff Taylor, Rick McAuliffe from the May 4th group, Nick Salitro's here, James Callahan is here. And I guess the place I'd like to start, if it's okay with you, Alana and Tina, to and Rick and Jeff certainly, just to sort of give us a bit of a lay of the land up in Providence, because there's so little good news. I don't mean good news. I mean, there's so little quality news that comes out of Providence anymore. It's a little frustrating when you're sitting out here in the middle of the ocean. But before we start, I've worked with a lot of legislators over the course of my life, both fortunately and unfortunately. And I can say in this case, fortunately, for those who haven't met Tina and Alana or haven't worked with them, I have not worked with legislators who are as responsive to the towns and constituents in their district as our two are. Literally anytime you reach out to them, I think Amy's experience has been the same. I think others on the council have had the same experience. And I just want to tell you how good that makes us feel to know that you are engaged with our town and that you actually give a damn what we think about stuff. And there's a lot before you, and having that to lean on, to know that there's someone who's actually watching and tracking and assessing is just immensely valuable to us. So thank you. I don't know who wants to start, but if you want to give us a little overview of how painful it is in Providence, that'd be great.
I think maybe we'll leave that to Rick. Rick, maybe you want to give a general overview of where we stand. And then maybe Alana and I could weigh in on some priorities and issues that we're seeing up in both of our respective chambers.
Wonderful.
Sure. And I just want to thank the council for your time today. I hope it's beautiful and sunny as it is here in Providence, although we've turned it's about 10 degrees cooler today, so coat has to go back on. But so it's been a normal start to the year in a lot of ways. As you know, the General Assembly begins the first Tuesday of the month in January. It's a new General Assembly after the 2024 election. There's a number of new legislators. There's been some reorganization of people serving on various committees, some new chairs. In the Senate, I think, anyone has to read the newspaper, realize there was some changes in the Senate. The Senate president currently has been out of action due to his health. And so that has stalled some things. We've had bills still being introduced. The House and Senate are both introducing bills, but we've had the Senate be a little behind on the bills, although they seem to be, and I'll let Senator DeMario talk about this, but they do seem to be catching up. I think on Friday, there was 31 pages of bills, which I it took Jeff and I a couple hours to go through. But hearings are being held. The House and Senate have been meeting. The Senate just added another day from just Tuesdays and now Tuesdays and Thursdays. But hearings are being held every day. As a matter of fact, the hearings today start at 4 o'clock. Legislation, most of it should be in. The deadline was a couple weeks ago, and they were away for the February break. During that time, the staff worked on getting those bills numbered, written, numbered, and sent upstairs, and then obviously introduced. As you know, there is a deadline for bills, although both the leadership on the House and Senate have allowed town bills to go past the deadline. So if you have a town bill, we can certainly, they could certainly work on it. Obviously, that would be needed to be accompanied by a council resolution. The budget obviously is the number one issue. As you all know, and we discussed when we were in Block Island in January, the state has been a beneficiary, like all states, of more federal dollars, money from the CARES Act, from the Inflation Reduction Act, some other money that came in during COVID. The biggest infusion of cash, quite candidly, since the 40s. Since the 30s, when we were getting out of the Depression. So this is the biggest infusion of cash, real dollars. And so the General Assembly had more time to, or more money, I should say, to make key investments. Unfortunately, that is dried up. That money had to be spent by the end of this year, but it had to be allocated by last year. I'm sorry, by the end of next year, but it had to be allocated this year, last year, by the end of 2024. And then obviously we know what's going on in Washington with the administration cutting programs, stopping money that's already been passed by Congress and signed into law that will eventually get there, but it'll be through the courts and so forth. So that's kind of what's going on. You're going to see a reaction to that based on what revenue will come in. As you all know, the General Assembly look at revenue twice a year. They look in November, where they have a revenue estimating conference to find out how much money they have in the coffers. And they also have a caseload estimate conference, which basically says what kind of cases or what kind of assistance in our state do our people using. So, are there more people in the child care assistance program? Are there more or less people in developmentally disabled or elderly population? Are there more people at a certain income level that may be taking state subsidized money? And so all that is done in November. The governor bases budget on that. And then in May, they do another one, which gives the General Assembly either a little bit more money than they expected because, say, sales tax went up or income tax went up, or they're in a situation where they have less money than what the governor estimated. So all that process is going on right now. I think, I'll yield to the rep and senator, but I think right now it's getting all the bills heard and getting testimony from everybody, and then kind of going back and seeing where the priorities are and seeing where realistically there's support enough to pass a bill, or there's revenue inside the state budget in which to fund a program or continue funding it at a level that sustains the program. So all that stuff's going on. Specifically for us in Block Island, and we can talk more about that, but I'll bring up the first kind of large issue because I think it's important for the council to see what's going on. And I just want to say that both Senator DeMario and Representative Spears have been on all these calls. There was a group of people, and Amy Land had been on a couple calls as well. There's been a couple meetings with coastal communities or tourism communities, if you want to say that. Block Island, Newport, Middletown. I know Charleston's been on some, Westerly, Narragansett, and it's been looking at the things that we've always talked about, which is how do you sustain a community who has stress every summer during the tourism time on their water, their wastewater, their law enforcement, their not only their public safety, but their public health buildings or hospitals or health centers. road infrastructure and all the stuff that goes with it. And so the big issue this year is looking at short-term rental and in what way to fashion a way that works. There's three proposals right now. The governor's FY '26 budget, which will begin July 1 of '25, which is the budget that Senator DeMauro, who sits on the Finance Committee, Senator Spears, Representative Spears as well, will be looking at. The governor has a proposal right now that, as you all know, they only tax individual rooms at 5%. And that 5% is then broken down into so much goes to the community, some of it goes to the tourism council, some of it goes in other areas as well. There's a proposal by the governor to address homelessness by changing it from individual rooms to whole house. So it'd be a 5% whole house, but all of it would go to the state and to combat homelessness. I know there's been a pause, or not a pause, but a concern by the communities I just mentioned. Where the short-term rentals and where people are renting homes and so forth, why is all that money going to go to address a state issue when the reality is it's going to be on the backs of these communities which are hosting it? So there's been comments by members of the General Assembly, the leadership. I know Speaker Sakachi is opposed to all that being used for homelessness. He has indicated that a lot of money has come in through CARES Act, through other COVID money, through a bond that just passed that included money not just for housing but for homelessness. So he would like to see that money potentially used in a different way. So you have that. Then there were two bills. Representative Carson and Senator Gu have put legislation forward that would tax 5% whole houses, but instead of it going to homelessness or instead of it going to the formula, which is currently involved for the individual rooms, the whole 5% would go to the local community. So no longer would anyone receive that money except for the community. So the tourism councils could lose that money. And then there's a third piece of legislation, or third round of this, which is Senator LaMountain and Representative Slater. Their legislation would simply go to 5% whole house, but it would keep the percentages at the same that are currently being done for individual rooms. So the Tourism Council, theoretically using them, they in the town, they would get what they get from the individual 5% for individual rooms, but it would be for the whole house. This is for taxing on anything that is on platforms. So not only Airbnb or Vrbo, but it would also be for real estate people who use platforms to advertise and transact rentals and so forth. So that is a big issue. I'll let the legislators talk about the inside politics of it, but I think you're going to see a 5% tax on whole houses this year. The question really becomes, will it be 5% for what the governor wants? Will it be 5% what Representative Carson and Senator Gu have, where it goes back to the community? Or will it be Senator LaMountain and Representative Slater, where it goes, it just increases the revenue. It keeps it 5%, but it includes whole houses, but the breakdown will still go to the parties that get it now with the individual houses. So that's a big issue. Obviously, there's tax classification stuff that we are working with Amy. One of the, obviously incentives that communities would like to see. I know Amy sent us a council resolution, and thank you for all of that, would basically allow you to look at a tax structure that changes for someone who rents their house for a long-term rent lease. So if I owned a house on Block Island, but I leased it to a family, a school teacher, and their family for a year, my tax would be different than if I have that property and I'm renting it each week for someone in, through a platform or not through a platform, but through renting it each week for tourism purposes, income purposes, and so forth. So those are the kind of the major things we're working on. I know there's a water issue as well. Appropriations. I've been having conversation with Amy The deadline next week for Senator Whitehouse and Senator Reid is the 21st. We've had a couple conversations on that. Next week as well. I'm sorry, the House is the 21st. The 18th is no, the other way around. Senate's the 21st, 18th is the House. Unfortunately, the House Republican Appropriations Committee have limited the amount of areas in which you can seek some federal dollars. So we're kind of limited more in scope on that side. But we're going to be working on that as well. So those are the main, I would say, issues as of March 12th. But things change every week, and obviously some state issues sometimes affect what happens locally in terms of priorities in the budget and also priorities of legislators' bills to get passed.
Thank you, Rick. Senator Tina?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in.
Good.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you so much, Rick, for that comprehensive overview. I don't have any other points to add specifically to anything that you said, and thank you to the council for inviting us here and for your kind words at the top of our meeting. A couple of maybe contextual things I'll add. So as Rick mentioned, I am serving on the Finance Committee this session. We are in the process of hearing each department's budget to situate that in the context of what is happening nationally. Part of those conversations have been around what the budgeting plans or kind of triage plans are for our various state departments if any federal funding streams were to end. And so those are conversations that are happening. In addition, on the housing front, I think it's important to know that the Rhode Island, our Department of Housing is a relatively new department, and we have just recently confirmed a new secretary, Deb Goddard, who will be overseeing a pretty major, we believe, reorganization of housing policy governance in Rhode Island. So right now, a lot of the dollars that come in from bonds, from federal sources, from various allocations, flow through a couple of different entities. And so there is an organizational plan proposal out there. The Senate Committee on Housing and Municipal Governance, which I sit on, is going to be reviewing that plan in our committee tomorrow to look at how we're going to be implementing those changes. And so when we're thinking about even that question of, that tax money going, where, basically it will be under the purview of the Department of Housing. And that is a conversation that I've initiated with the secretary around some geographical equity in how those funds are reallocated, because it is supposed to be for homelessness and housing resources, which in my mind should go to ensuring that our communities across the state have access to those funds to be able to develop things in the way that they need to meet housing needs in their community. So certainly representing communities like Block Island, North Kingstown, Narragansett, that is absolutely a concern that I've been talking to all of those municipal partners about and thinking about how we can work with the new secretary to direct some of those resources more down towards South County. Finally,
Thank you.
in addition, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I think that's at front of mind for a lot of people in our community is, it's a town that very much supports doing on housing. But we don't have, for example, the planning infrastructure that you might need to undertake these things. And quite appropriately, I mean, there are you're dealing with challenges in Providence and in other large towns, but we have real needs too.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And I would actually submit that, the needs of a town like New Shoreham or Narragansett, there's a much bigger impact with building fewer units than you might need in other municipalities.
Right,
And
right.
so, even though those are smaller projects, and again, there are those barriers that you mentioned, I think that it's just something that I want to make sure is kept at the top of the conversation. And to your point too about, planning resources and things like that, part of what the state fiscal recovery funds were used for in the housing space was around the idea of deploying technical assistance to municipalities and different types of municipal planning grants that were awarded to different communities for help in this space. And as we progress with these investments in housing, it is my hope and intention to advocate to make sure that those dollars continue to be directed toward giving that type of municipal and technical assistance to communities that need it, to figure out like what those puzzle pieces are to put in place to get more units up and going. So and then I'll just say briefly, I'm also serving on the Environment and Agriculture Committee again this session. A lot of talk, obviously, about about energy policy, affordability. That's something that you folks are have a little bit of a different situation with out there than us on the mainland with Rhode Island Energy, but also just, again, looking at what's happening in the federal landscape and what might be changing in terms of the federal dollars available for just, things that we've kind of taken for granted that would always be there, like efforts toward clean air, clean water. A lot of those things are being rolled back. And so we're trying to figure out what we need to do to keep things going in the right direction here in Rhode Island. So I'm going to pause there. I'm happy to answer any questions now or turn it over to Tina. And then I know that there's some specific Block Island issues that you guys want to discuss.
Sure. Do you want to ask questions or do you want me to jump in?
You can certainly jump in. I just, before it escapes my mind, one of the things I know how active and aggressive the speaker has been on some real fundamental changes to planning and zoning statutes related to housing. And I would expect that our community is likely to come to you not seeking relief from requirements, but we don't fit a lot of some of the cookie cutter type stuff. We're weird, I guess, or we're outliers when it comes to a lot of things that you might assume. I mean, I'll use Warwick because it's the speaker's district, that the challenges in Warwick or Barrington or East Greenwich or are not the same as here. And I just would ask you, you guys have always known this, but I always feel like I have to say it publicly. We're a housing embracing community, but we don't fit a statewide mold. So that you should probably expect that we'll come to you on stuff.
Yeah, and just to build on that, thank you for having us and the kind words, as the senator mentioned. It really is a privilege for us to represent Block Island, and I'm sorry we're not there in person today, but I did want to build on the housing conversation. We did have so I'll just tell you the committees that I'm on. I'm on Housing and Municipal Governments in the House. I am also on the Environment Committee and the IT and Technology and something committee that's really geared at AI, anything related to IT. So those are the three committees. And I'm also on three commissions: the Bottle Bill Commission, the Beach Erosion Commission, and the Climate Change Commission. So there are a lot of things happening. Housing remains a top priority in the House. One of the things that will be particularly important to Block Island, and there was a gentleman who came last night who mentioned it from hospitality, the dorm style housing. There's a bill that it grants, or it basically says that towns can zone for dorm style housing. So as you know, you heard some of the homelessness issue that happened with the pallet shelters. They're just the lack of a zoning structure was one of the issues that held that up. So there are some steps being taken that I think in particular Block Island might benefit from, but you already have relaxed many of those concerns on the island.
I was reading that bill too, Tina, and one of the things that concerned me a little is it seemed to be focused on homelessness, and I could envision a world in which dorm style housing is not a homelessness tool, but something that helps with our affordable housing by having seasonal workers utilize it, which might free up other types of housing for year-round renters. So just to sort of keep that in mind, pigeonholing it for one particular use, I think would not be helpful to us necessarily.
There are two bills. One is for that pallet shelter to create a different type of classification for the fire marshal. That was definitely what you're talking about, but there's a new bill. Carol McAtee is the sponsor in the House, and it is really geared towards making sure that towns can build exactly what you just said. That you can utilize workforce housing, and you can create a different type of housing structure, just for what you said, for seasonal purposes and workforce. So I think it's a good step forward, and it could potentially help Block Island. You're already sort of doing it to a certain degree, but it will be codified in state law, so it'll be beneficial to you if we should pass it. I also wanted to just say, like, at the state, and up at the General Assembly, just from a context, obviously the federal, to build on what Senator DeMario said, obviously the pressures from the feds and any lack of resources that we don't get from the feds will have downward impact on our state budget and to local communities. And we're obviously mindful of that and how that will play out and shake out for all of the communities that we represent. But the other things that are kind of top of mind in the House, and I'm sure in the Senate, is healthcare. Our healthcare system's in real trouble. So there are a lot of concerns and issues related to that, and Block Island is not immune from those challenges, and you're actually probably more harmed by some of the challenges that are happening in the healthcare space. So there will be some efforts to try and stabilize the healthcare system. But again, there are a lot of changes on the horizon. So that's another priority that I can see in the House. There's, a little bit of oxygen being sucked out of the room related to the assault weapons ban. That is a big bill that will be taken up this year, and that is going to be debated, and it's going to be challenging for both chambers. So that's going to be on the horizon. A couple of notable things that I think Block Island be interested in. The Act on Coast we passed last year, the RFP was issued. I don't believe they selected a vendor just yet, but that work will be underway, which will be the assessment process. And I will make sure that they take their time and come to Block Island and make sure that they're assessing the needs of Block Island when it comes to sea level rise and infrastructure and all the things that we know are relevant when we're talking about climate change and sea level rise. Bottle Bill Commission, I'm sitting on that, and we do expect that there will be some type of bill that will emerge from both the House and the Senate to address our plastic waste issue that we have that is really very toxic to our environment, filling up our landfill. I'm sure it's a problem on Block Island, more so than on the mainland. So there will be a bill that I'll be working a lot on this year. And then just to build off of what Senator DeMario said, the bill that I have been vocal about and supportive of is Senator Gou's bill, as well as Representative Carson's, which is really to take that 5%, which is a new tax. We're not taking anything from anyone, and we want it to go to you. We want it to go to the towns that it's generated in, and we are working at the South County level to push that hard. That's not going to be usurped and taken up to Providence. And the last thing I just wanted to say was related to the requirements on the housing. We did, the South County representatives met with the speaker and the housing secretary about the inequities of how Rhode Island Housing basically attributes funding that we are allocating, and how inequitable it is for us, because the scoring is totally weighted towards urban communities, and we want that changed. So we are working to get that changed at the inception of the review process. So when you do submit something, that you are not disadvantaged by their actual scoring system, which today you are. So it's harder for us to intervene and get you funding when you're already disadvantaged and you can't even meet the basic requirements because some of the criteria that they have. So
Right.
we are working on that. So I'll stop there and happy to take questions, talk about what else you want us to work on.
Thank you both so much. Amy, do you want to talk property tax? Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure, just to run down the ones that we've already either discussed or might be on the plate. The first was the local property tax relief, and a few of you mentioned that. So we've already sent a council resolution and proposed enabling legislation up through Rick and Jeff. I assume that it's made its way to the senator and the representative for introduction, and that enables the town. So this is enabling legislation to adopt a tax classification plan that would provide for a residential tax rate benefit to those who may rent their properties or units of their property to a year-round resident. And so that mirrors the qualifications that we've set forth in our homestead exemption, which you helped us introduce 2 years ago, and takes that one step further to apply it to year-round tenants as well. So that one should be on its way to you. The next one on our list is the landing fee, which has a little bit more discussion, I think, at the council level, but the inclination at the moment is to consider a proposal to adjust just the amount of landing fee that's in our legislation right now. And that would be I think it's fair to say, a fairly modest adjustment based on inflation and additional costs that are borne by that landing fee today. But that's still up for the council discussion again next week. And so we'll forward that if and when the council makes a decision on how to proceed. Did anyone want to sort of poll the legislators on how that may go over, or we think we're comfortable with the direction we're going?
Sure. I mean, I think when it comes to landing fee, one of the challenges is what's an appropriate level that doesn't have people shaking their heads saying you guys are pigs, and you know as you would imagine, when we were talking about this last time, I was saying $5, which is just silly, but it would be helpful, and not to put you on the spot here, but one of the things that the council is working through is, what is an appropriate level that would not just be laughed out of Providence.
So, I mean, I can add a little bit of additional context. A few years ago, I worked on this on the Narragansett side.
Yes.
So we increased the landing fee. What the town council originally was asking for, I'm gonna have to check my notes on this one, but I believe they wanted a $1 increase. It had not been increased in like 20 years. I believe that we ended up getting like half of that. I think it ended up being like a 50 cents increase. But I have to say that that was just due to the town council's negotiations with interstate navigation. It was from my experience on the Senate side, it was a pretty easy sell that, costs for things like police details, garbage collection, everything else has gone up in the last 20 years. It would absolutely make sense that we would need to collect more money. It was not a hard sell in the Senate to try to get it to $1. So, for what it's worth, I mean, I think that there is probably a good spot that's a reasonable amount. But I would say that there's some room there for an ask.
That's
from my
very
perspective.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't, I will defer to the senator with her previous experience, and I will support whatever the town proposes, and try and usher that through.
I have a quick question just from an institutional side. I don't know, Keith, Nancy probably has a good idea of this. How come Block Island and Narragansett have not sought increases at the same time to kind of somewhat coordinate their price increases collectively? which, as they negotiate with interstate navigation. I'm just curious why there's a discrepancy and they haven't been increased at the same amount. Was there ever a reason for that, or just?
I don't think that in my experience, I don't think there's a particular reason for it. I sort of felt like when Narragansett sought theirs, it was an opportunity missed for us,
Okay.
Rick, to be honest with you.
Okay. I was just curious.
We were not terribly nimble when that happened, and probably should have been.
Okay.
And I was on the council then. I mean, it's not like
No, I'm talking about even before 20
it's not
years
like I'm
ago.
blaming somebody else.
Yeah.
And if I
I
could, I
can
think,
weigh in on this, just to be clear. The fees are not the same, or at least weren't the same when the Narragansett was increasing their rates. So currently Narragansett's at 50%. Their increase a few years ago is a 100% increase by 25 cents. So it went from 25 cents to 50, and New Shoreham currently has a 50-cent per passenger rate currently. So they haven't been the same consistently. So if they were to kind of go together, it wouldn't necessarily reflect a change at the same incremental levels as they exist now, because there was the difference between the two. So
Hey,
just
Jeff,
to put some context on that.
Nancy was going to make a comment. Hold
and
on.
I think also when you look at it, the needs are very different between Narragansett and Block Island.
Sure.
So, that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I was just curious and sorry.
Just, my only recommendation would be when the council presents whatever it is that they're proposing. In my mind, the purpose of the landing fee is for the business that is impacting your town, and the costs associated with that impact are what that is really supposed to be for.
Right.
So if there's a way for you to think through what some of those impacts are and those additional costs that your town is incurring because of
Yes.
that business trade, that would be helpful to us. Because actually when you said $5, I didn't think that was unreasonable. When I think about the
That's why I love you, Tina.
tens of thousands of people that come to Block Island and that you have to care for in some way, shape, or form. So but that would be helpful to us when we are obviously at the hearing position for when we hear this bill, to say, these are the reasons why, this is the cost to the town, this would generate X dollars, and this will help us. Because quite honestly, if there is any pullback on the state side of any municipal aid, educational aid, any of those things, you are going to need to rely on revenue sources that you can generate from your own town. And that is, tourism is one of them. And I personally think that that's a great avenue for you guys to be thinking about. So that's just my pitch. And what I'm asking of you, the town council, is to prepare something for us when we come to the table, so we
Sure.
can make the solid ask to the General Assembly.
That's fair.
Next on
I
our,
have a quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I just have a quick question for the council or Amy or anyone on this issue. We focus a lot on the per passenger fee that's assessed when it comes to the ferry service, but technically the town of New Shoreham can leverage that fee upon the marinas to collect for those passengers that arrive through private vessels. Does that collection take place, and what percentage of your fee is collected from the marinas, or is that process? I'm just curious how that's undertaken, and what percentage you're collecting from private passenger boats versus the ferry passenger boats.
Take it away, Amy.
it's gonna be a short answer, which is that it's still an evolving process, and we do have an agreement with one of the marinas to collect that on our behalf. We will reach out to the other two this season to see if we can bring them under contract as well. It is a very small amount. I don't have the number off the top of my head. It's less than $5,000 from the one that we do collect from. But I will get that back to the council. And then the other.
Amy, is that assessed at the docking rate? I'm just curious
It's
where that's
per
assessed.
person. So it's a per head collected,
Okay.
yes, at the same time they pay their dockage, but it is not affiliated with the dockage rate. It's a per person.
Okay, and I'm assuming, is that on the private boat owner's honor system to report how many passengers are coming on their boat? I mean, I can't imagine you have an enforcement there checking to see how many people are coming over on a boat. Just,
It's an
I'm
interesting question that we're thinking about how to reintroduce that for our anchorage. Because we are going to tighten that enforcement within our harbors department for collections off the rental moorings that the town owns and the town docks. But our biggest challenge or area of exposure after the marinas that we don't currently have agreements with is the anchorage, where it is a little bit more self-reported since we don't have direct contact with them. So we're working on that part as well for this season.
And one
Um,
last piece of context, Keith, you had mentioned an increase to $5. Just to give you an idea, the legislature enacted a law last year that went into effect, well, actually 2 years ago, that went into effect this past June 1st for Newport. And they assess per passenger that are departing a cruise vessel, not ferries, but to cruise vessels, and they define it in the statute as but $10 per person that are departing and embarking off of any vessel that's coming from a cruise vessel that is landing at in Newport. So it's $10 per person coming off those particular vessels and landing in Newport.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that when we did discuss this at our last meeting, we addressed a lot of what you brought up, Tina. Amy has a lot of numbers to back up the request. But we also did talk about the Harbors Department has said that now that they accept electronic payment, that we have a much better collection rate, correct, on the moorings?
Yes, and so our intention when we go forward to the legislature for any change is to be able to stand there and say, we are also doing our best to collect this accurately and appropriately. We want to be able to say that.
Wonderful.
Hotel tax, we've obviously talked quite a bit about. I'm not sure we need to go too much more into detail, except the general statement that I think reflects the town's position, which is we're not necessarily pushing for an expansion to short-term rentals, but given that seems almost inevitable, we would like to ensure that those funds come back to the municipality. I said it, I think that's a fair way to say it. And so again, you'll have resolutions from the council probably next week, the end of next week, representing that position.
Yeah, this is probably a novel thing for you, but I think our opinion is if there's going to be money, we'd like it.
Fair, yeah.
Did anyone want to add anything on the hotel tax topic? Okay. Moving on to housing, the town council has taken a position supporting the enabling legislation. I believe the housing board has as well, enabling legislation on the conveyance tax above 900,000. So you'll see that resolution in support. We haven't taken action at the council level on any of the others, but I don't know if the housing board wanted to speak on any of those. I know you've been considering some. But, so I think that's the only one that's been in front of the council actively is the.
Yeah, and Amy, I've been on the phone with Mark and Cindy on 3 or 4 occasions, and we were supposed to have a meeting with Rhode Island Housing to look at, as you know, we just went under the 10% affordable housing ratio because of one sale of a home. So we're trying to get some, I think as Senator DeMario and Representative Spears said, try to get a better area of definition because we're probably the only community anywhere where one sale of a house can move you from being 10% to under 10%. And as a result of that, we lost out on some money. So we've had conversations and on the conveyance 2%, I got your stuff, Amy. So thank you.
The last one on school funding, or at least the last one specifically on the agenda, I think is more an item for open discussion and to hear any input that the legislators may have on how we can approach school funding for New Shoreham over the long term, given that it's never going to be a quick change. We don't fit the mold. And for fiscal year 26, the upcoming year, our proposed school aid is $99,000 for the entire year, for the entire school, on a $6 million budget. So 2% of our school funding comes through the state. And that just doesn't feel okay in any public school system, I think is how we would, and it's not clear how we can change that in a really fundamental way. Is that a fair way to put the question on the table?
That's about as kindly as I've heard it put. But it's it's at some point something has to give when you're getting 2% of your education budget from the state. We happily embrace a lot of the state requirements, and I think the community has demonstrated its willingness to invest in the school. But jeepers creepers, I think last year it was like $84,000.
Recognizing, however, that this is probably not the year where any education monies are going to be flowing from anywhere, but long term, as we go along, this is what we're talking about.
Well, I mean, I read something yesterday that I think it was Barrington is concerned that they might lose $500,000, right? And I was like, well, how much are they getting that
Yeah.
they're upset about losing $500,000? I mean, they're getting 5 times what we're getting, obviously a much bigger school system. But if we were to go down to the percentage, what percentage of their budget is being covered by this money? It doesn't sound equitable.
That was exactly what I was.
Were you okay? Yeah, I was going to say Tina and I have spoken about this. Yeah.
But I don't know. Our education aid report isn't out yet. I don't know if yours is, Senator. But that can be our argument. We talked about this last year, potentially. Is there a floor that can be built
Yeah.
in? It's only going to pick
Yes.
up Little Compton and Block Island. Like, that's pretty much it. And maybe that's all we do is try and get a floor so you get a reasonable amount of money that's proportionally percentage wise appropriate.
I mean, honestly, I'd be happy with the floor if only because it's a recognition of the fact that this is kind of silly.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and I struggle with this somewhat in Narragansett as well, because there is only one elementary school, one middle school, one high
Right.
school. I mean, obviously you guys just have one all-inclusive school, but
Right.
there's no direction to go in when you talk about things like, the state goals of like newer and fewer schools, like you can't have fewer schools, right? Like, so there does need to be that recognition that whether it's looking at a calculation of a base percentage or a base amount or something that just recognizes that regardless of how many students you have, your operating costs for your building, and again, like you said, complying with the RIDE policies is going to cost a certain amount, and the state, I think, does need to take some more responsibility for that. So, I think any direction that the council has around what feels like an equitable thing to be pushing for, what would better meet your needs, because I think that there's an opportunity to have a conversation based on that, rather than just saying like, how about a little bit more, like I think really looking at what would be a good place to start from with those conversations from your perspective. I would definitely welcome that to take on that conversation.
Agree.
I hope this isn't inappropriate, but what's going on with can we talk transportation money for a minute?
Yes. I was going to say the same thing, Amy, and I don't know if maybe Jeff and Rick be able to help in this area or where we can start with, but the state garage and the salt shed, we're all in agreement, the town's in agreement, DOT's in agreement. But those funds seem to be getting cut out at the last minute. And we have this unique setup where we actually take care of the state roads, this agreement. And in that, they've agreed to replace it subject to funding. And the problem isn't us all agreeing on it. The problem comes down to It seems to get
Execution.
cut out of the budget at that point there. And for us, I think it's a front burner issue and I don't know the best way, but any help in that area I think would be.
And I think it's not a new item. I mean, we're now at the point where the garage is falling down. This has been an ongoing discussion for 10 years.
Yeah, and there's no disagreement. Everyone agrees it needs to be replaced, they want to, but it just, I think it's one of those things that has just got caught up in just the system.
Bill, I can address as best I know. Obviously, it is you know, the work that the town has done to maintain the roads when they really shouldn't have to maintain state roads, and obviously the shed. Candidly, I'm just being candid here. They have acknowledged, as you mentioned, that they will fix it. We received or the town received a letter last year, or an email suggesting that it looks like it would be pushed to the powers that be to get it funded. That did not happen. I have to be honest with you. I think that the shed is just another project in the state that's being held up as a result of the bridge on 195. The House and Senate Oversight Committees had a joint hearing with the director. During that time, they asked him numerous questions about the bridge, but not only the demolition, but building a new one. One of the questions that was asked was, do you have enough money to fix this bridge? And he said yes, and he brought out the model in which he was able to fix it. And then someone asked, what if you don't receive the money? As you recall, it was during that time and even today where money that was approved, signed for use in the 195 bridge has been now held by the new president in his administration. Most people believe that money will come forward. But when he was asked that question, he said, quote, I have enough money even if we don't get that federal money. I don't know how we can say that without taking money from all the other projects. So it's a concern that there's not money right now to fund some of the projects that his own department has said should be funded. So I think this is being held up until they have a better idea of what they have in terms of fixing the 195 bridge. Obviously, money's segregated in different ways from the Federal Highway Administration for a road like 195. For maintenance is different than for what you have, but what I think is based on what's happened over the last 15 months since the bridge went down is things are somewhat paused, and I think it was made worse when the money from Washington didn't specifically come over. So I don't know what to do other than to continue the advocacy. I think it's important as we have the congressional delegation come to visit us this summer to take them to that shed. I know the last visits that we had, we didn't take them to that shed, but I think it's important because a lot of federal dollars come from the state gets a lot of state DOT gets a lot of federal dollars. And I think if we have the congressional delegation say, hey, we're delivering this money to you, I know, the importance of that bridge for commerce and for safety and everything else. But, there's 38 other communities that have needs as well. And obviously, we have a story to tell on ours based on everything that's been done before. But I think, Bill, that's the issue. I think the 195 and was going to say, and the uncertainty of how it's going to be funded. I mean, they'll say it's certainty, but again, you're talking factors of getting the federal dollars, which should come in, but they haven't come in yet. And obviously, steel tariffs were just put on by the European community yesterday. You're going to need steel. You're going to need materials from out of state. Director talked about that. So I think that this is just my opinion. It's not. I just think there's a lot of uncertainty with their budget, and I think no new spending, other than the stuff that's been allocated, not approved, which is on top of the list.
I would agree with your assessment. I think the difference between the salt shed and the garage are, the garage is to the point, it's not a want, it's a need to the point where I think it's a safety issue. And
That
I
thing's gonna
think,
collapse.
yeah, and we're talking the salt shed, I can buy into that. But I think going forward on the garage, I think at that point there, which is very minimal money. I mean, remember, this is their building.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point Like I said, that is definitely a safety issue, and I think we need to push it forward. I definitely agree with you with the money from DC, but they're still gonna need to maintain their physical buildings that DOT has. So
I don't want to put it, I don't want to put,
even if
Bill,
we
I
have
don't
to
want to,
separate it out, you know?
yeah, no, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, but maybe setting up a call with the director, um, with the council or something would be impactful to, rather than just a letter, but say, we need to talk to you about the safety of the shed and our concern for it.
It's probably a
And
good idea. I
think-
defer over to.
We-
just so we're all using the correct language too, we're not talking about a fix.
Right.
Fix is not the right word. It's a
Correct.
rebuild.
Yeah.
And I
a rebuild.
realize a
You're right.
rebuild is more expensive and very sympathetic, well, not that sympathetic, but a little sympathetic to the bridge issue, and the budgeting problems there. But this has been a recognized problem longer than the bridge has been a recognized problem. It's been ignored longer. I get that obviously they just ignore problems. So I don't know are they waiting for it to fall down? Because it's being held up by giant cinder blocks
Jersey
right
barriers.
now, the east wall and the south wall. And, I think our road crew is doing a terrific job of pasting that building together, but it's not safe. It's not workable, and it's the only building that they've got here that they have to fix. And it's the budget amount is so much smaller than anything else they have going on. It's the low hanging fruit. I just wish they would see that.
And I think we have a good relationship, and I think it's a good setup. I think we just have to get this to the right people. And I think your point is good. Maybe it's that, needs to go to that level. Certainly the people that Amy has been dealing with, I think they were as disappointed as we were that it got cut out. So I think that I'd really direct it over to Amy and maybe Rick and Jeff or our reps. So that.
Yeah, Rick, I would look forward to setting something off offline and
Okay.
scheduling a meeting with the director.
Okay. I just wrote that down anyway. So perfect.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is if this is I see your solicitors on, if this is a safety issue, that becomes a legal issue, right? So I don't know if there is a letter that should be drafted in legal form to identify the issue as a true life and safety issue, and that if the state fails to obligate funds to correct the situation, that they are the ones that will be liable if something were to occur.
Mhm. I will also say, when this conversation, obviously was at the top of the list last year, I did also reach out to DEM because of some of the hazards cited, with the potential problems there. And I know that DEM had outreach to DOT, to try to push that a little bit. So, I think to the extent that it's appropriate, if there are other levers there to push, that might also be something to think about in terms of pointing out exactly what you said, that this is a need, not a want, and that there are, potential consequences in various ways to not addressing it.
Great. Anything else, guys? Thank you so much for giving us so much time, guys. Everybody on this call.
If it's appropriate, could I actually
Yes, please.
make an inquiry of you guys? So I recently was reached out to by a constituent from Block Island who was inquiring about the status of the process for parking passes. So they were, questioning, about the conditions. And I know we've had this conversation before over on the Narragansett side, and I know that there are some improvements being made on that side. But it's my understanding that there is maybe a discussion at the town level around how to prioritize who gets those passes, or maybe a redoing of the process. So I just wanted to reach out to you to see kind of where that stands before responding.
Great question, Senator. Amy has an answer.
I do.
That's my standard. When I don't know the answer, I'm certain Amy does.
We were working on this today, and DEM has generously extended 22 spaces for the town to manage on an as-needed or emergency basis for people who who may be challenged to get back into the state lot. So we're just refining that draft policy and application, and we expect it before the council within the next 45 days.
And I think it's really important, because you don't hear this frequently enough, I would imagine. DEM has been incredibly responsive on this.
Yes.
I think, you always hear when state agencies are, sort of not as responsive as you'd like them to be. But we had a really, I think, productive meeting, for example, about deer recently, and Terry Gray and his whole staff came over. They have been very responsive.
That's
So
always great to hear.
we do expect that program to be up and running for this summer season.
Great.
So.
Good.
And I just had one other item, which is that it came up in the Finance Committee a few weeks ago that the DMV is actually investing in a mobile DMV vehicle that will be going to different areas that are under-resourced by or harder to reach, an actual physical DMV location. And I raised in that hearing that might be something to coordinate with Block Island about, so that it basically anybody who needs to renew their registration, their license, those types of things, this will be a mobile truck that could get on the ferry and come out and perform that service for you guys. So that is a conversation
Wow.
that's happening. If it's something that would be of interest to you, I will, just keep in touch with the DMV as they roll that out. But I thought it was, they were like, well, we don't know if we can get it on the ferry. And I said, is it smaller than a fire truck? Because I think you can get it on the ferry if it is. And they said, yes. So
Wow,
That's
that's
great.
great stuff.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'll
fantastic.
just add, Senator doesn't even know this yet, but I just submitted for a grant, a legislative grant for Wood River Health Services to continue your dental clinic, I guess, that is at the health center. So I just wanted you to be aware that I did put in for that. And this is the time, if the town has any additional asks for any legislative grants, please send them our way, because this is the time for us to request them.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you both, Rick, Jeff, James, Nick. Really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having
I have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.